So the next exercise we went through was to actually get all of the, um, the functional areas placed near the existing building. So here are the existing buildings now that initially we traced from Google Earth. Then we actually a CAD file appeared about a month later. We brought the CAD file, refined the areas, and these bubbles represent the functional areas placed on top of the buildings. And then the space relationships were an Excel file that we handed to the Leo Daly team, and they actually defined what the relationships need to be between the spaces. So the lines are kind of like rubber bands saying these need to be near each other. So the exercise we did with Leo Daly was the hour and a half going through 3 schemes, resolving the schemes by saying what do we put in this building? Does it fit on this floor? Can we put that on this floor? Do we have to go to another floor? And then taking that into more of a block model view. So this is, and all of these are updating the report. So the square footage, as we change the size of the shapes, we can say, well, the original requirement was 2,000 square feet. Now we're at 1,500 square feet, but we need to split it between 2 different buildings. What's it going to look like on the site plan? What's it going to look like on the floor plan? What's inside the space? And each of these spaces, even though in this particular project we don't have the program for the equipment in the space, it could actually contain the equipment as well too. So when you hand it to the design team, not only will it have the space, but it could have the actual equipment that essentially we created a Revit model or BIM, a detailed BIM that could get handed to the other team with that. So if I go back to Google Earth and now turn on the other view, Scheme A, so now we had the initial building here in the corner, but now we have the final, this was the final design from Leo Daly with the actual spaces in the clinic and the resolved renovation of this particular building. So we went floor by floor from their model. So we see that on this floor, administration, EMS administration is on this floor, and how many square feet it is. This is the exact same data that ends up in their Revit model or in the deep profiler analysis that you'll see later. So that's at the very kind of high level view with the data coming from the project, quickly getting in here. And this exercise that I described earlier, it was once we have the data in place, these exercises of saying, well, how do things fit? It was an hour and a half for 3 schemes of about 500,000 square feet each, running through all of them, creating all the reports in the background, all the initial square footage, floor by floor, creating the BIMs. So we essentially created a Revit model of the whole facility at that level of detail. Creating Kobe files, all that stuff is kind of a byproduct of the design process. We actually had, there's another screen, I haven't opened it yet, but essentially you can say all these color codes that you see are driven from a database. So we could say compare this scheme to the original program for design, and turn spaces red, they're at a delta from that. Or turn spaces red that should have been in this building or should have been near this other one. All that happens, it's kind of like a spell checker basically going and color coding a BIM from that. And the adjacency lines too were interesting because the adjacencies were handed to the design team. I can take out the export that I showed earlier for Excel of the spaces. I could say export Excel of the department level, let's see, where is it? Space relation. There's kind of functional area groupings, but the actual adjacencies were, there's an attribute, I can't remember if that's in SEPS or not, but there was an attribute that Onuma had that said these are, we handed them the Excel file and they said these need to be near each other or far from each other or in the same floor. And that Excel file was then injected back in, and these lines were automatically generated as well too. It basically takes the adjacencies from the so the important piece is this is what was delivered as the final from Leo Daly as the report that came as a PDF. Even though we weren't part of that process of getting to the final, we had the 3 versions before this, and then we got the final almost like after it was completed, which is still fine. The ideal process, if we were in there with them actually working with us, we would have all the assumptions behind it. But imagine this final design that ended up in the report, and then a year later you want to hand this to an architect and say, these are our assumptions, now go design with this. But we've changed, something's changed the last year, and these 3 pieces are no longer in this building, they're moved over to this building. The project manager would basically do that either in an Excel file and move it to another building, and the architect would get a Revit model that looked like this. Then all of a sudden you'd be comparing that to the new design. So it becomes an engine to continue with a lot of effort that went into, to get to this point was the 6-month process that all this team went through, all the charrette process and everything, but now it's in here that can be used for further refinement.
So what we're really seeing is this as a natural evolution of what you guys as the owners can ask for in your deliverables. I mean, it may not have been that long ago when architects would be working on physical drawings and then they would keep the quote unquote originals and then give you guys reproducible vellums. And what we're really saying is now there's a new level of deliverables. It shouldn't take the AEs more time because BIM is becoming more and more ubiquitous. So they should be able to give you the data, not just some analog version of that data.
And that's the part that's most exciting, that we work with other teams as well too. Imagine if each team is doing their own thing and we didn't have to spend a week kind of saying, well, what do you call it? It's basically you push a button and you import it into whatever tool you're using, and it's the same data flowing into dProfiler or into Revit or to whatever tools. And we're not spending time saying, well, wait a minute, you missed this, or that was the wrong version of the file.